So here we go.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Get down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
You down with D&D?
Yeah, you know me.
I'm down with D&D.
Yeah, you know me.
Who's down with D&D?
This whole party.
Greetings, everyone out there in D&D world. I am your host, Shawn Merwin of Down with D&D, and we are incredibly fortunate today to have with us none other than Sly Flourish himself, Mr. Mike Shea. Mike, thank you so much for coming on to talk D&D with us.
Thank you for having me. The pleasure is all mine.
Oh, I think the pleasure will be all our listeners.
We'll all be full of pleasure.
Well pleased?
We'll all be well pleased.
Excellent. We like that. We like pleasure.
I was trying to figure how am I going to say this and not make it sound dirty.
Yeah, well, everything.
I don't think I
these
succeeded.
days.
Yeah.
Yeah, D&D, it's all about the weird names that you twist into horribly perverted things.
Right.
So we're off to a great start.
Excellent.
So if anyone out there doesn't know Mike's work at Sly Flourish, let me drop some knowledge on you. Mike started a very popular blog a few years back called, appropriately, slyflourish.com. From there, he released a book called The Lazy Dungeon Master, which looked at helping DMs more efficiently and effectively prepare their games. More help guides followed, including Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master and The Lazy DM's Workbook. For most, that would have been a career, but no, not for Mike, though. Mike also has been creating adventure content, including Sly Flourish's Fantastic Locations, Sly Flourish's Fantastic Adventures, and most recently, Fantastic Adventures, Ruins of the Grendleroot. Mike also hosts a podcast called DM's Deep Dive with Mike Shea. And last but not least, you have streamed a one-on-one game with Enrique Newbie DM Barrera, where you were playing Dragon of Icespire Peak with you as DM and Newbie as the player. Whew. So I know you've done other work. You worked with Teos Abadia and Scott Gray on a product for Wizards that was called
Vault of the Dracolich.
That's right. And I know you've done writing for the Adventures League as well.
Yep. Yeah, one tiny correction is Enrique Bertrand is newbie DM.
Did I say Barrera?
You said Barrera. I don't know who that is.
Okay, sorry, Bertrand. So thank you for correcting me on that. Because I know that. I don't know if autocorrect kicked in or what.
Damn you, Siri.
Yes. So, what brought you into this world of writing about D&D as well as playing D&D?
I decided. So I've been writing blogs forever, right? I've had blogs since the mid '90s when they were called Dot Plans. There was a guy named John Carmack. He's still around. He did Doom. He made the video game Doom, and he used to do these things called the Dot Plan, which I guess is some Unix thing. And I like that idea, so I was writing about Doom and writing about other things. And then I got involved in home theater stuff, and I wrote about home theater stuff. And then I got heavily involved in EverQuest, and I wrote tons of fan fiction for the game EverQuest. And then started in on D&D. And I'd always been playing D&D. I've been playing D&D since I was 14. So it was easy to come back. And the nice thing is that I think I probably had more than 1 million words written in various blog formats before I started writing about D&D. So I was very comfortable saying I'm going to write a weekly blog and actually do it, right? Most people are like, I'm going to do a weekly blog. And then 8 posts in, they're like, I'm sorry, I haven't posted in 2 years.
Right.
And so I kind of knew how much I could write and how to keep my own schedule and all of that. So I also wanted to focus on something specific. And at the time, the 4th edition of D&D was just coming out. There was I kind of got in early on that. I saw the early play test. Well, they didn't really play test it, but I saw the early previews of it at Winter Fantasy in Washington, D.C., back when it was in D.C. And so I wanted to write a blog about 4E D&D because it was this ground floor opportunity to sort of write about this new version of the game. And there weren't a lot of bloggers that were talking about it. It was 6 or 7 of us, Enrique Bertrand being one of the other bloggers that wrote about it at the time.
Sure.
And I also said I don't want to just write about D&D. I want to pick something specific, and I want to. So what if I focus it on DMing? And we all have known for a long time that it's hard to get people to DM the game. There's always more players willing to play than there are DMs willing to run. There's a fair bit going on there. So I said, well, why not just focus on trying to help all of us, myself included, get better at being a DM, and ideally help people who haven't DM'd get into the seat and give them something that makes it a little easier for them to DM. So the site, so Sly Flourish has always, the website has always had that focus. I try to make it not about me, and I work pretty hard. There's two things that I do in the blog that I pay a fair bit of attention to. One is I really don't feel like anybody does or should care about what I'm doing. I think they should care about what they're doing and what we're all doing together. And the other one is that I really feel like I am in the seat next to the person that's reading it. I'm not dictating to them. So it kind of drives editors crazy because I use a lot of we. I'll say when we're playing Ghost of Saltmarsh, maybe we should think about X, Y, and Z. And people are like, what that, why are you saying we? And I was like, because I'm running it and you're running it, right? And we're both figuring this out together. So I really try to put myself in the position that, I always try to write as though I'm not the authoritative, the authoritative creator of this idea, because I'm not. And that we're really exploring this infinitely big discipline together.
Yeah.
So
and that's the funny thing about D&D is, right, there aren't any new ideas, or very few, because people will see something and say, "Oh, that's so great! That's the most creative thing I've ever seen," and it's basically a ripoff of like White Plume Mountain.
Right. I mean, we are at the point where people are writing. I noticed this the other day. People are writing like game supplements that they're charging money for that are essentially including rules that are in the Dungeon Master's Guide as alternate rules. And we're like, it's in there. Like, you don't need to have a whole supplement. It's right there on like page 260.
Right. Because players don't necessarily read the DM's guide, and DMs don't necessarily read the DM's guide.
It's a lot easier to buy a product on DriveThruRPG than it is to read a Dungeon Master's Guide.
Right. It's true. Right. It's true. It's. I just took this chapter out, and here it is.
Right.
But so one of the things that's been on my mind recently is new DMs, right? And as you said, with 4th edition, you saw this opportunity and this need for advice for DMs, and we're to the point now where we need that more than ever, because we have a huge audience of people watching streams, a huge audience of people listening to podcasts, and they're ready to take that step into playing or DMing, but what you see on a podcast or a stream or what you hear isn't necessarily easily translatable to you stepping behind the screen.
I think it's easier than it was, though, right? That I think one of the things that has made D&D as popular as it is now, and Wizards of the Coast has said as much, and when they've been talking about it, and they actually have, I think they hire survey folks to actually go out there and poll and survey the community, which is more than we can do when we're just poking around on Twitter.
Yep.
And they have said that people being able to see what D&D looks like now is a huge improvement over the way D&D was absorbed back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s and early 2000s. That you didn't really know what D&D looked like. You didn't, like, you'd read the book, and the book would have these sort of scripted, like, here's what a game looks like, and here's what the DM says, and here's what the player says. But that still wasn't like, but what does it actually look like? And now we have way more examples of what D&D looks like than we could ever watch, and that's pretty amazing.
It is true, and I think my point was, it's one thing to watch something, it's another thing to do something.
Sure. Yeah.
So it is easier in the sense that you don't go in, it's not a total mystery.
Right.
But there are techniques that maybe a DM that they're watching on a stream uses that a DM who says, okay, I'm going to run my own game now, doesn't quite understand.
Sure. Yeah.
And so we as fans of D&D wonder, how can Wizards help implement this new DM pool into a frame of mind and with a product that will help them.
Right.
And so one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about specifically, because of your background with helping DMs through your blog and through your books, but also as a DM who has been running the Essentials Kit adventure, how does that work as a new DM tool? So I want specifically to talk to you about that.
Sure.
And it's even more important, I think, because when you were running it with Newbie DM, you were running it one-on-one.
Right. Yep.
With one player and one sidekick, which the product says it supports. But as I read the product and reviewed it and tried to suss out how it could be used, I was like, I don't know how you can do this. So it's interesting. Your experience with that is something that I want to draw up on as well.
Mm-hmm.
So could you give us just kind of an overview of what the D&D Essentials Kit has and how it's used?
Sure. Yeah. So the D&D Essentials Kit sits on top of or next to the original D&D starter set. Mm-hmm. And how those two products interact, I think, is still unclear.
Okay.
But it is there are definite differences that it has between the starter set. The starter set's been around for 5 years. It was the first, mm-hmm. I think it was the first 5th edition product that came out.
Yes.
And it has been played extensively over the past 5 years. It is, I think more than, many. Every time that I've seen a new Dungeon Master go onto either Facebook or Twitter mm-hmm. or Reddit or any place and say, hey, how should I get started playing D&D? Yep. Everybody says, go start with the starter set.
Yep, and I was just going to make that point.
that it is and I still think that is the best way to start, even with mm-hmm. the Essentials Kit being out. The Essentials Kit is a fantastic product, and I love it. And I think mm-hmm. that there's a specific area that it falls into. But I think if you still want to get an understanding of what D&D is like, the starter set, I think, is a better start, and I can talk about.
I was just gonna say I'm gonna ask you why.
Yeah, so one reason is that it starts with pre-gen characters, and mm-hmm. I think it's easier for people to understand D&D, specifically if they're a new player, by being handed a pre-gen and then learning from the pre-gen, than it is mm-hmm. for them to spend a long time building a character from scratch. That's an arguable point. I know other people would argue the other side of that, and I think different circumstances, will depend.
Yeah, that was one thing I was really noodling over, as I was thinking about this, because the starter set absolutely had, was it 5 or 6 pre-gens?
6 pre-gens, yeah.
6 pre-gens, and
6. I think it's 6.
Yeah, it's enough to have a whole party.
Yeah, right.
And in my experience with new players trying to teach them the game, pre-gens, good, well-made pre-gens are super important.
Right.
And then I thought, with the new people who are coming to the game, who have seen streams, who have seen or heard podcasts, a lot of them know what they want to play. Mm-hmm. And they don't want a pre-gen necessarily. They want to start their own story. And so I was wondering, when I opened the Essentials Kit and was looking at it, a couple years ago, basically, why no pre-gens? Right. And that was my thought was, making people sit down and make a pre-gen, I think is great, except if you have these people who are totally new to the game and they're like, okay, I'm going to give this a shot, and you take 4 hours to build a group of pre-gens with your players, and then you're like, next time we're going to play.
Right.
You tend to maybe lose some of those players.
Yeah, and the reality is, like, I don't know that. I mean, maybe, I don't think either you or I really know, right? Like,
no,
I think
you're
that
right.
It's hard to know en masse, like, how that actually plays out, and I presume that there's probably a lot of ways that it goes. One interesting thing that occurred to me pretty late when in playing the Essentials Kit and kind of trying to figure out some of the things that they did in the design is that I think that these two products work better together than they do apart. And I think it's probably hard to say, like, well, if you want to get started, buy both boxes. But I think that there's an argument to be had of, like, you're certainly not going to go wrong if you own both boxes. Mm-hmm. And if you do have both boxes, there's a lot you can do with them. And
Yes.
then you have that mix of, do you want a pre-gen? You got pre-gens in the starter set. Do you want to make a character? You can make a character in the Essentials kit. So when we talk about like what the Essentials kit has, just I'll give a quick rundown of the things that are included. You know this very well, but for anybody that's listening, so it has a core rule book in it, like a rule book that describes how to play the game. It has character creation rules for 5 different classes, which include subclasses. So it's not just the D&D basic stuff. It actually includes subclasses that you would find in the player's handbook, which is pretty interesting. It has the 4 core classes: the wizard, fighter, cleric, thief, but then it also includes a bard, which I think is a really good choice. It has a lightweight DM screen that everybody seems to complain about because it's really thin cardboard, but it's like, man, it's $20. What do you $20 for the whole box? Let's not complain about the thickness of the cardboard of the screen. And I think it's just fine, but I also don't use a DM screen, so it's easier.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, it's got a nice map in it, and then it's got it's got a whole stack of cards. And the cards have everything, like it's got initiative cards, like Teo Sabadia style initiative cards. It's got cards for magic items. It has picture cards for NPCs. It's got quest cards, so that describe the quests that are going on in the game. So they use this idea. They're all punch out sheets of cards, but all those cards are like physical things you can sort of drop on the table and use. And I think that was a really good design.
That was, and especially like the NPC cards or the sidekick cards, to be able to show people a picture, and that's something they did, back when they were transitioning from 4th to 5th in the D&D Encounters games, right? They would send out those packets to the game stores, and a lot of them you could get an NPC card. So if you were talking, you could hold it up and people could see it, and that really captures the imagination of new players.
Yeah, and it's something that I don't do enough and should. And just my own game last Wednesday, one of my players was like, "Man, there's like 7 NPCs that all," and I'm like, "I have no idea who you're talking about." I was like, "Man, I should have pulled. I've got them. They're sitting upstairs. I should have pulled out those face cards and just be like, here's this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy." And they're like, "Oh, it's that dude with the weird thing on his face." Yeah. So it was definitely a good idea. And the adventure, and it has an adventure that's included in it called Dragon of Icespire Peak. The other interesting thing it has is the only place where Wizards has this are, as you mentioned, rules to play one player and a sidekick, so that you can play D&D with just a DM and a single player. And I don't say I was skeptical. I was really hopeful that would work. And so Enrique and I had talked a lot about this box and everything that was in it, and both of us wanted to try the one-on-one rule. So we said, well, let's just do it. Like, let's do a streaming game. We'll get together. So we both happen to have Friday mornings free in our schedules. So we said, why don't we record a game? And we did. And I'm really, really glad we did. And both of us had talked multiple times about how surprised we were at how much fun it was to play D&D one-on-one. That both of us came to the conclusion that nothing was lost playing one-on-one. That there were arguments, a fair number of arguments of like, well, 4 players is really about right. I made these arguments, right? That 4 players is right. You want to have a lot of brains around the table, and that the creativity is going to come from the mashing of these different brains that are at the table and the mashing of these ideas. And that's where the really fantastic stories are going to come out. And I think that's true. But I think when you have 2 people that are friends and both creative people, you can come up and we just had a ball. Both of us had so much fun playing that game, and you can get so much done, right? Like you can. Right. We got through. So I think we did 9 sessions. They were about an hour to an hour and a half each, and got through the whole adventure, right? From level 1 to level. I think he got to level 7, right? In like 10 hours. Right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. And you can do a lot, right? You can really, because you only have one player. So there's not a lot of like people waiting for other people's turns.
Sure.
There's a big advantage in that. And, so it helped that I'm pretty experienced in running D&D, and I knew how to kind of watch out for things when trying to scale the adventure for one player and one sidekick. It definitely helps to have a sidekick. And having 2 characters, so that if one person's down, the other one can drop a healing potion on them. Sure, it makes a big difference in situations. But the other thing is, so much fun to have a role play opportunity, right? Where Enrique ran his character Barundar, and he controlled the sidekick of Bing, who was a halfling healer type. but I role played Bing.
Okay.
And that way we had this banter back and forth, and it just grew and grew. And like both of us really felt like we didn't just understand our character, we understood each other, and we understood the relationship. And that is something you don't get in a 4-on-1 or 5-on-1 D&D game.
True.
You get a little bit of it, but like the number one NPC interaction was occurring between these two characters, and it was pretty constant through the whole game. And it was hysterical. We were having so much fun, So yeah, it was really a surprise and a lovely surprise.
Okay, so the question I have to ask now, and it's going to take me a minute to ask this question. I was hired to write a follow-up to Dragon of Icespire Peak, and this was before the Dragon of Icespire Peak was even finished. We were working on the follow-ups, and one of the instructions was it needs to be playable by one player and a sidekick.
Right.
So make sure you can scale it properly. Now, we didn't have any instruction.
Right. Make sure to scale it properly. We're not telling you how.
Right. And I mean, it's okay. Right. And so one of the first things I did.
This is Stormlord's Wrath?
Stormlord's Wrath,
okay.
Correct. So, one of the things I did was as soon as the box set actually came out, it came out at the same time that the adventures that we wrote, James Introcaso and Will Doyle each wrote parts of the 3 adventures that followed. The first thing I did was open the box and say, how did they do this? Right. And they didn't do it like I did it. So I'm like, okay, so how did you find that as a DM to having something in front of you that had to be runnable by a player and a sidekick or by a group of 6 players?
Well, the nice thing was I didn't have. So I just popped open your adventure here on D&D Beyond to see and I just grabbed like the first encounter to see how you did it, and you did it the same way they did it in the other ones, or at least I don't know in post editing or whatever, if it, how it worked out, but. There's this new nomenclature of the attacking creature. I'm reading from your adventure back to you. The attacking creatures are comprised of 1 zombie per player character and 1 wraith per every 2 characters, rounded down, including sidekicks. Right. A little complicated, but that generally works, right? Okay. And I think that idea of just scaling the number of monsters directly with the number of characters works on its own for the most part.
Right.
The only tricky bits come like when you have monsters who can incapacitate a character directly.
Right.
Or if you have like a solo, right? Like, if you have, I don't know, a white dragon,
right.
one player, one character and one sidekick are supposed to defeat.
Right. One of the things, I mean, the first 3 quests from Dragon of Icespire Peak, and we're going to have spoilers galore here, so just, bear with us, is a manticore.
Yeah, right.
Right, and it's not the manticore has half hit points.
Right.
It's a manticore, boom, or it's all of these Okra Jellies.
Right.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, whoa, okay, so that's not really scaling at all. Yeah. And so I was, I didn't see it right away how they were going to do it.
I think so. I have a complaint and a theory. My complaint is that I think other than scaling the adventures properly for first level characters, I would say the D&D Essentials kit is nearly perfect. Right, as a product that's designed to kind of bring people into D&D, give them a low cost product with a lot of stuff in it that feels like D&D, that really kind of gets them involved. I think it's nearly perfect. I think its number one problem are the things that you mentioned, which are that the first 3 to 5-ish quests put very powerful monsters up against first level characters.
Okay,
and you're doing it with DMs who may be new. And you're doing it with players who are almost certainly, well, not always certainly new. I mean, sure, veterans can play this too. But like an Okra Jelly is not a good monster for a first level character. It's going to get its ass kicked. The character's going to get its ass kicked.
Right. I mean, not only is it hard for players, right? It's hard for DMs because it's okay. Now, does it split now?
Right.
Is it,
and that's so
yeah.
Right. This was the first thing that happened when Enrique, and you can watch it. I'll give it a little shameless plug. Enrique, we played this online on Twitch. And we put them on YouTube. So there's actually there's 9 episodes of this on the Sly Flourish YouTube channel.
And we will have a link in the show
Thank
notes.
you. Yeah. So, and you can see how we kind of struggled through this. We struggled through a lot of things, including how the hell to record a show. That was a whole other problem. But yeah, and I just cheated, right? Like I just ignored the fact that the Okra Jelly splits. But if you think about it, like Enrique was playing a fighter, and Barundar, a fighter with a axe, and all he could do is slash stuff.
Right.
And when you slash an Okra Jelly, it splits into more Okra Jellies.
Right.
So he's hosed, right? He had not to mention the fact that it hits for
12
points of damage on a hit.
Right. 9 plus 3
Yeah,
acid.
9 plus 3
yeah.
acid. It's just going to knock people right out. And so it's a terrible monster. And I think there's multiples of them if you have more than one. I think there's 2 that are lurking around. And then there's multiples of them if you I think you can they add if you have more than a certain number of characters, you add another.
Sure.
So yeah, like I just it boggled my mind that Okra Jellies were there at level 1. Like it's such a and to me it was just like it's an error that could have such big repercussion. Like you think like why argue about Okra Jellies? But imagine you got brand new people that are going to play this game and their first experience is getting their ass kicked by this creature who's pretty complicated to play and they're like, you know what, this game's not for me. And now you killed an entire generation, right? Thousands of years people aren't going to be playing D&D because this one guy wanted to play and instead of fighting a gray ooze, which is a very reasonable monster to fight, they're fighting an Okra Jelly. Now the Manticore is another one. Now the and right, like if a DM is playing that Manticore like they would normally, it's going to kill people, right? Manticores are nasty. Right. But there's some pretty easy fixes. So I gave the fix for the Okra Jellies. This is replace them with a gray ooze, right? Gray oozes are much more reasonable. They don't split and all that. They're exactly the same, except they're gray instead of yellow, and they're very easy to fit in. And the Manticore, the way I ran the Manticore is it had half the hit points it normally had. It had been wounded by the White Dragon. It had used up all of its tail spines. Okay. And it really just wanted healing potions because it's hurt. So it's a much better roleplay opportunity than it is a battle. And that's how it played out. Yeah, that's how it played out in when Enrique ran it. And having listened to, I follow the Dragon of Icespire Peak Facebook group, so I can kind of see how people are doing it there. And a lot of them ran the Manticore situation. They recognize that that's a better role play scene than it is a fight. Yeah. But then there's another one shortly thereafter where you're dealing with were-rats, and were-rats are immune to non-magical weapons. Yeah. And you're going to have nothing but non-magical weapons. So that's a real, or silver, right? Silver to non-magical weapons. So you got to make sure that the characters have a way to get around that, or or they're hosed, or again another role play scene.
Right. And all of those things are fine to do at low level as long as you give. I mean, it's a great learning experience for new players, right? Here's a monster, you can't just beat it down, but remember that so and so gave you 5 flasks of oil,
right? Yeah.
Well, there's your answer, and that aha moment can make a generation of D&D players fall in love with it.
Yeah. I'd argue the only thing is they still don't know what a skill check is, right? We're
true.
we're talking about new players, yeah.
Right. But if you give them a hint,
yeah.
Right? If you say, the sage mentions that fire can hurt certain creatures,
right.
or something.
Yeah.
Just
a DM, and this is I tried to do this. So the good news is I wrote an article on Sly Flourish about this. And it is now the #1 most viewed article on Sly Flourish, of all the articles that I've ever posted there. And I'm happy about it because more than anything, I want people to be able to buy this thing and run it and not and enjoy D&D and not get turned off of D&D because they got killed by a stupid Okra Jelly. And the and a DM who is armed with the understanding that Okra Jellies are bad, and that Manticores are bad, and that were-rats are bad. If they're forewarned, they'll have those opportunities to foreshadow stuff and to put things in the hands of players and the characters so that they can deal with it. And hopefully they do, right? And more than anything, I want to be wrong about this, and I want people to just love the D&D Essentials kit and start them on the road to this hobby that we love so much. I don't. Yeah, I think me writing an article is not solving the problem because way more people are going to have this than are going to read the article. Sure. But maybe they'll Google it, maybe they'll find out. But probably after the fact, like, man, I killed everybody. What did I do wrong? Yeah. So the interesting thing there is I don't actually think it's a big deal with the number of characters, right? Like that, certainly fighting a Manticore when you have one player character and one sidekick versus 4 characters is going to be a very different experience. But at these low levels, like, people are still going to drop if they get hit by these things anyway. So it kind of doesn't matter too much how it scales for different numbers of characters.
Yeah. Well, I mean, having the DM learn early that you're in charge, and if you want to kill characters, you can.
Yeah.
And if you want to let them live, you can. That just needs to be spelled out, I guess, in the text, right?
There's this other sort of, and it bothers me a little bit. There's this idea that, like, D&D needs to be hard and lethal, and we've seen people, Wizards of the Coast, who talk about, like, look, D&D is a challenge. It should be a challenging game where lethality is a real thing that can happen. And I agree, except it's funny how that stops after level 5. Right? And then all of a sudden at level 16, you're just not going to get killed by anything. Like, the monsters are so much weaker. I actually did some math. I was like, how hard does a pit fiend have to be the equivalent of an Okra Jelly at level 1? And it would have to hit for like 270 damage a hit. Right? It has to unleash such way more damage than it actually does. So I would agree that, like, there should be a hard mode dial where, if, like, you want, if you want D&D to be this hardcore lethal game, but it should be hard all the way to 20, not just at level 1. Right? And level 1 should be the least hard level.
Right. In my experience, right, you can't write a first level adventure that's easy enough. Right. And you can't write, like, a level 11 or higher adventure that's hard enough.
That's exactly right. There's this weird power scale. Yeah. So
Now, one of the things I think that the Essentials kit does beautifully, and it does a lot of things beautifully, is this quest system.
Yeah.
Could you want to talk about that?
Sure.
For a second?
Yeah. So they really, again, kind of went way back to the basics of D&D, and instead of having some kind of, like, major story that sort of expands in the beginning of the game, they just say you go to the inn and there's a quest board. And the local town mayor has put 3 quests up on the quest board, and you can go and read them. And there's handouts that are included in the box, and the players can read them and then pick which quest they want to go on. And they pick a quest and they go on that one, and they level up, and they come back and they pick the second quest and they go and they come do that quest and level up. And then at that point, the remaining quest is removed and 3 new quests are put up that are getting them to the next set. And it's this really just, like, straightforward basic system. It would almost, certainly there are DMs who are like, that is too basic. Like, we're better than that. Like, we're better than having to have, like, a note on a board, a job board, right? But when you're thinking about, again, sort of the core of D&D and for new people and what that's like, it is really hard to make it easier than, you are adventurers seeking work, here's a board with jobs on it. Right, that's such a straightforward way to do D&D. But I did joke about the fact that, like, I wonder how that works at 12th level, right? Like, do you still have quest boards? With hey, the Lich King is giving us trouble. If you could take care of that guy, we'd really appreciate it. We'll give you
Bob, could you
50,000 gold if you take care of the Lich King.
Right. But it's a great segue into how people consume not just D&D, but all media at this point in our life, which is in little bits. Yeah. Right. And so, back when, we were playing first edition or whatever your earliest edition is, and we had these epic quests and these 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, 5-year campaigns where you played for, 3 months before you gained a level, playing every week, and you had 10,000 NPCs memorized and you knew their backstories, and all that's great, but that's not the way people consume anymore.
Yeah, and I heard Chris Perkins talking about this, right? Oh, yeah, and hang on, let me bookmark that part of the conversation. There's one other thing that I think is really interesting about the Okra Jellies. I want to talk about the Okra Jellies again.
Okay.
And then I'll come back. Which is when I talked about how these 2 boxes work well together, that the starter set and the Essentials kit, work well side by side. One of the things I heard is that Wizards of the Coast specifically didn't want to duplicate monsters between the 2 boxes. And the reason why we have Okra Jellies is because they already use gray oozes in Phandelver.
Interesting.
And when I looked at that and looked at the 2, I was like, wow, that's really right. Like, there's very little. It's funny. Like, I was like, what? There's no bandits? How do you have a first, tier 1 thing with no bandits in it? And there aren't any, right? So there's a few overlaps, but they're really rare. And I think it's because one of the design ideas was that you could use these together, and that a DM who had both of them would now have a set of monsters that were complementary to one another instead of an overlap. So so
I didn't realize that, but that's
it's the
very true.
so I don't know it's true, but it was the best argument that I heard about why the designs of these things were the way they were. Now remind me of the other question that I
Okay, so we were talking about how we consume games.
Yes,
basically.
right. Yeah, and so one of the things, so I'm sure, as a very seasoned adventure writer yourself, that you look at these things and try to digest its structure and like what were the designers thinking. And I think it's fascinating that these adventures use way fewer words overall than adventures that we're used to. Like you look at these monster adventures like Descent into Avernus and Tomb of Annihilation that are 100,000, 150,000 word campaign adventures, and then you look at this one and like most of the quests are 2 to 4 pages. They're like I think they're like I think maybe I don't even think they break 2,000 words for the largest quest.
Yeah,
and they're really, really like the text is really light. And I heard Chris Perkins, who said that they are thinking hard at Wizards of the Coast about the fact that people just aren't reading big things like they used to read big things. And that, everything needs to be tweet sized these days, which bothers me a little as a writer.
Yeah. Yes, as it should. For those of us paid by the word.
Yeah, right. It bothers me that we don't sit and read. But on the other hand, you're like, well, you could, wring your hands and argue, or you can try to understand it and see what you can do. And I think there's a lot to be said about, the fewer words, the better. I always felt, I'll complain a little bit about like Adventures League Adventures, is that the idea that the default size for those was always 10,000 words. Yeah. And you're like, I don't, I remember I wrote one. I'm like, I don't need 10,000 words. I could do this easily in 5.
Right. Yeah. It's, that's another, it's almost another format, right? There's an audience for that already, and that audience expects that kind of format. So, that's one reason why I can write one thing in one format and then go over to the Adventures League and say, okay, with this, I may get a DM who's picking this up to run it in 20 minutes.
Right.
And they want things spelled out, right? They want to know what everyone is saying, and if the characters do this, what happens. And so I can forgive that wordiness in that arena.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, you and I were both at Winter Fantasy, and we saw a lot of DM. You ran? Did you run stuff at Winter Fantasy?
No, I just played.
So, but of course we're always like staring at the DM and like scrutinizing like how are they doing, and like I'm going to take notes about this DM. So, I do wonder if they need the description laid out, or if that the more words the harder it is for them. Like, especially if they have a time crunch of like, I got to get this adventure ready in 30 minutes. I'm like, if you could give them a 2,000 word version of the adventure instead of a 7,000 word, that's probably going to help them.
It's something that I've thought a lot about in the last 20 years.
Yeah, right.
and at this point, believe it or not, we would like more words.
That's interesting.
Laid out in a way that makes it very easy for me to run it.
Right.
With more description and more, not necessarily more box text, but more guidance.
Right.
For how you as the adventure writer see it going.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. So I listened to you and James Intercasso talking in the last show, and James has a new idea for box text that he's been talking a lot about on Twitter, and I think that a couple of products now have it included, which is sort of like readable bullet items, right?
Sure.
And sort of that abbreviated version of read aloud text, and I definitely think there's something to that. I'm still a box text guy myself. Like I still Runes of the Grendleroot has lots of box text in it, but I think that there's I'm certainly coming around to the idea of like maybe you only use the box text for like the big rooms, and then small rooms you do 1 or 2 sentences that could practically be read aloud.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's fine. But I know that especially for Adventures League DMs, when they had that period of time when the rule for writers was no box text.
Yeah, right. That's probably
the DMs were pulling their hair out.
Yeah, it's a little draconian.
And and so and then they got the next set of adventures. And we're like, oh, thank you. There's box text again.
Well, and it's a little unfortunate that they can't just say like, hey, you're adventure writers. We assume you are going to do your best to try to do the right format for the thing you're writing.
Sure.
But it's also, I know in many circumstances, Adventures League writers might be relatively new to adventure writing. So
that happens. True.
Yeah.
That happens as well. Yeah. But yeah, so the quest system, kind of shorter, more discrete adventure design, where you can end after an hour.
Right.
And not have to remember what spells you've cast, remember your hit points, remember what quest you're on, and we'll come back next week. It's just, hey, you just finished this quest. Excellent. I know we've only played for 90 minutes, but hey, we'll come back next week and we'll play for another 90 minutes. Right. I think is a very strong way to introduce players to the game.
Right.
Introduce DMs to the game, and then if they want that longer experience, there are ways for them to get that.
Right.
And I think that's how the Essentials, like you were talking about the Essentials kit working together with the starter set, I think that's a perfect example of having the best of both worlds possibly.
Right. Right. Yeah, it was really interesting because I've been running the Essentials kit for some brand new players at my home. And it occurred to me, like, while I was running it and I was having fun and they're having fun and they're learning D&D. And I was like, on the other hand, like the story that's happening here, where it's like the biggest deal is that some cultists are summoning a crazy, storm boar. And by the way, there's a dragon who's causing trouble. And then I was like, but then you think about the story of Tyranny of Dragons. Right, where Tiamat is being brought up from the Nine Hells to take over the Sword Coast, or Tomb of Annihilation, where the Archlich of Sararak is going to is absorbing souls to create a new god. These huge epic adventures where there's so much bigger in scope and scale, and there's so much deeper opportunity for the characters to sort of get written into the world around them than the quest system. So that there's an advantage and a disadvantage to it. I think it's, again, perfect as a good introduction for D&D. I think a lot of times we probably overcomplicate our D&D games when we got to remember that the stories happen at the table, right? The stories don't happen when we're writing or preparing our adventures. They happen when they run. And the more we're creating seeds for the story. And but there is this like interesting on the idea of comparing the great big hardback epic adventures that Wizards of the Coast publishes a couple times a year with this very lightweight, hey, we need you to go talk to this person, some gnomes are in trouble. And why don't you go visit those crazy gnomes over in the caves? Yeah. Right. So,
and get shot with a
crossbow.
crossbow.
Get shot in the face with a crossbow. So I love it. And I also love that there is such a wide range of the kinds of adventures we can tell in D&D. So yeah.
And as it seems like they are slightly ramping up their release schedule, they are giving much more opportunity for DMs and players to pick the kind of adventure that they want.
Yeah. So an interesting thing about that, and you might have more insight into this than I do. But I think the ramped up schedule was actually more happenstance than a plan. I think what Perkins said is that they have two different kinds of products. They have the ones that are on the big schedule that they're planned years in advance, and then what they called POOs, or products of opportunity.
Products of opportunity,
right?
Yep.
And that those are like when Target comes to you and says, "Hey, we love the starter set. We want you to do another, and we need it in 6 months." Yep. And they're like, well, I guess we'll do the Essentials kit. Or,
or Acquisitions Incorporated.
Or Acquisitions, says, right, right. It turns out those guys at Penny Arcade have been writing this book, and, you can either sue them into oblivion. I'm making this assumption. You can either sue them into oblivion or bring them into the fold, right? Yeah. So, so there's all the, and then I don't know if the Matt Mercer thing was one or the other. Like, I got to assume they've been talking for a long time about this. I don't think Matt Mercer showed up at the door with a book and said, hey, how would you like to have the Wizards of the Coast brand on this book?
Right.
Then you could be the number one best-selling book on Amazon.
Exactly. Yeah. before it even
comes out. So so I'm curious what the release schedule. We don't know, or I don't know, but I'm curious what the release schedule for Wizards is like in the future. But I don't necessarily know that they are ramping it up.
Right. Well, I think you're right. I think it's been an accidental ramp up. But with things like the DMs Guild, where there's just so much content.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That you
outside of Wizards of the Coast, it's exploding. Yes.
Right. Exactly. I mean, the Kickstarter for the Cobalt Press's Tome of Beast 2.
Oh my God.
You know, their first one was like 200,000. I was like, oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
You know, $200,000.
Yeah. They got 6,000 backers. And...
Yeah. Now they have 400,000.
Yeah.
Almost $500,000.
And then Tollus, you've got Monty Cook's Tollus Kickstarter is going gangbusters. And
yeah,
it's
I mean,
crazy.
There's enough content out there where if you're a specific kind of DM, or if you're trying to figure out what kind of DM you are, or if you have a specific group of players,
or just want a bunch of stuff to read.
Exactly.
Like I just love living in other people's worlds,
yeah,
and I can't wait to just I want all this stuff.
Good stuff. Yeah. Good stuff. Anything else you wanted to mention about the Essentials Kit? Or teaching new players or teaching new DMs before we wrap up?
No, the only thing, and I think we beat it to death, is to me, the thing that would make the D&D Essentials Kit perfect is a DM understanding the dangers of those first level adventures in the beginning. And hopefully they pick that up and tweak it a little bit. It's really minor tweaks to fix it, but it can make for a much better experience. Or I could be wrong and everyone's enjoying it as is, and I hope that's true. Right. I hope I'm wrong.
Or DMs are figuring it out.
Yeah, or DMs are figuring it out on their own, hopefully. Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Well, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us on this most important topic of D&D at this stage of its life.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm a huge fan of the show, and it was an absolute delight to get an email from you saying, hey, would you like to be? I'm like, yes, I would.
Yes, I would. And, hey, if you want to support the show, there are many things you listeners out there could do to help. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/MMP. That helps us pay our hosting costs, edit the show, and so on. If you can't help us monetarily, give us a review. Tell people on social media that you like the show. Any of that would be super helpful, and we appreciate it. You can find me on Twitter at Shawn Merwin, or you can find me at the forums at forums.misdirectedmark.com. Mike, where can people find you on the internet?
So the two best places are my website at slyflourish.com and on Twitter at twitter.com/slyflourish.
Down with D&D is a Misdirected Mark production, the media arm of Encoded Designs. Hey, Mike. What should we do now?
Go kill some monsters.
Woo!
I had my cheat sheet right here.
You did.
Get down with D&D.
Sweet.
Get down with D&D. Get down with D&D. Who's down with D&D? You down with D&D? You down with D&D? I'm down with D&D. Who's down with D&D?